Welcome to the Letcher County Extension Show. I'm your host, Shad Baker, and we are here at the Letcher County Extension office today, and we are talking about winterizing tools. And we have with us Mr. Wade Blair. Some of you might recognize Wade from down at Frazier's. He's been there for 1 or 2 years anyway.
Yes.
Everybody's starting to know who he is.
Yeah, there you go.
But Wade's going to be talking to us a little bit about small engines and that kind of thing, and what you might want to do to get them ready for the winter. And if you don't, you'll pay a price.
Yes, sir, you will. Cost you in the long run.
That's right. So he's going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk just a little bit about hand tools and things that you also might want to winterize. So Wade, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, one of the things we like to say, we're winterizing tools, but not necessarily problem is the ethanol, and it's not necessarily only in the winter, it's all year long, but ethanol causes problems because it causes water bubbles, and when you got water in your engine, it causes you to lose power, and also it can cause it to rust. When you get that water, like in carburetors and stuff like that, they're aluminum. Therefore, you get the rust in your bowl. It's also in your carburetor, and therefore it don't perform like it should. And also, anybody that's worked on them, when you got your fuel lines, they become very brittle due to that water and ethanol, and therefore we work on them down at the store. Probably 70% of our jobs that we do is probably fuel related, and a lot of people don't realize that. They'll bring them in and say, well, it's doing this or it's doing that, but most of it is fuel related, and it's even more so when you let the engine sit all winter long and then try to use them in the spring. So therefore you've got several alternatives that you can do to prevent this. Is like in the wintertime, some people like to empty their gas tank out, but they make several different products too that can help with that too. But if you run them regularly, probably if you run your equipment at once every couple of weeks, you don't necessarily have that engine problem. But if you let them sit, you do get that problem. That ethanol and that water separates and goes to the bottom of your gas tank, and when you get ready to use it, it pulls that up through your carburetor. So therefore, you're going to have an issue with running. Like your fire departments and stuff, they have to be ready to use their equipment. Therefore, it sets a lot. So therefore, they make some stuff, and I'll talk about those in a minute, like motor mix, VP, fuel stable, several of additives that you can use to prevent that from happening. But a lot of people say, well, you know, that costs me this much to do that, but in the long run, you know, it's like say like you go to the dentist. If you brush your teeth regularly, you don't have a problem, but if you let it go 6 months and then you go to the dentist, it's going to cost you. So therefore, in the long run, you're saving money. Therefore, just same with this, keep your engine running properly. You are not going to be buying carburetors or fuel lines or anything along that line. So therefore, it's going to save you money in the long run. And then also, we're talking about winterizing not only like your weed eaters and chainsaws, we're also talking about pressure washers. And a lot of people don't realize with pressure washers, that water's built up in there, and if you leave them where they will freeze, that pump's going to burst. And when that pump bursts, that's probably the most expensive thing that you have on a pressure washer. So that's definitely going to cost you money. But in respect to pressure washers, they make an additive called the pump saver. If you'll use that, and try to keep if you possibly can, keep your pressure washer in a warm environment, and that helps along that line too. But if you don't, like we say, it's going to cost you a pump. But ethanol can, like I say, it can cause major damage to your fuel system, and in the long run, like I say, costs you money. So therefore, you need to realize that. And like I was saying a minute ago, we've got several additives. I'll get them. Okay. That I was going to show you what some of them are, but and then also I got a carburetor here. I don't know if it'll pick it up but it shows you what damage it can be done. Thanks, sir. I don't know if you can see it, but this carburetor, this is one, I brought it from the store just to show you an example of where that, we was talking about it causing corrosion in aluminum. The corrosion is there, and then also right here, in where your jets are, it's corroded there. And like I say, I don't know if you can get a good shot of that, but that's part of the problem. But like I say, to prevent that, like I say, you got some additives. You have got some additives on the line, and I'm not promoting any certain additives. I just got some at the store just to show you. This is called VP. This is 93% octane, no ethanol, and when you use this regularly, you won't have no problems. Obviously, you couldn't use it all year long, but in the wintertime, you can at least use it then. And then you got, Steel makes a product called Motor Mix, and that's another one of the additives. And then you got Stabil, Seafoam, several different things. Even Husqvarna makes their own, and like I say, I'm not promoting any one thing over another, but this is all 50-to-1 mix. And the way you use it is when it gets wintertime, empty your gas in your fuel tank out, and then put you about 1 or 2 ounces of this in it, start it up, let it run for about 30 seconds. Therefore, it's in your fuel system. When it becomes springtime, you add your mixture to it, start it up, and you shouldn't have no problems, and that helps prevent that. And then we're talking about pressure washers. They make additives, Pump Saver. Steel makes one. This is Briggs & Stratton. And what you do with it, you hook it up to where your hose goes in and release it, and then put that in the system. And what it does, it forces the water out. So therefore, you don't have water in the system to where it can freeze. But still, yet, if you got a pressure washer, my solution too is make sure you get in a fairly warm environment. But like I say, this is preventive maintenance to save you money. And I know it costs us a little to do that, but like in your chainsaws, if you don't use your chainsaw maybe 2 or 3 times a year, that's what I do with mine. I don't use nothing but the Motor Mix. I used to have issues every 3 or 4 months, but when I started using the Motor Mix, and I don't have any problems whatsoever. It takes care of that. They start right up. But I mean, if you're using a weed eater or trimmer, and obviously it would cost you a lot to use that all year long, but once every now and then, if it's not running right, you can put you a little bit of Motor Mix or the VP or the additive and use it maybe for a tank full, and it seems like it clears it out a little. But like I say, Steel has a thing on the ethanol, and what they tell you is when you have that mixture and that ethanol and water goes to the bottom, what it does, it leans out your fuel at what you're using. Therefore, that cuts back on your power and stuff. So that's another reason you need to use this Motor Mix, or like I say, VP. But it can cause, obviously, power loss, like I was talking about, and engine failure. Well, it's just like with your heart. If you're eating the wrong foods, you're going to have a heart problem somewhere down the line. But if you don't, then you're preventive maintenance by keeping active and all that. But in the long run, like I say, we work on the stuff, and a lot of people will come in the wintertime, and we tell them how to go about doing this preventive maintenance, but they still don't do it, but yet they come in the spring with a problem. Well, my trimmer's not running right, my chainsaw's not running right, and when you break it down, it's due to the fact of the ethanol. And these they're wanting to go from a 10 to a 15, and a small engine equipment will not run on a 15. I mean, fuel injection engines like in a car, they will perform on a 15, but small engines won't. So therefore, when you go to a gas station, and they do have the gas stations where you can get ethanol-free gas, and I would recommend that if there's one nearby that you want to use. It does cost a little more, but in the long run, it will save you money.
Wayne, what's the typical bill for when somebody comes in there and gets a small engine work done? Do you know about what that costs?
Normally, if you bring one in that's just mainly a fuel issue, you're looking probably at about $50. Now, if you have to replace the carburetor, depending on the type of equipment, you're probably looking at about $75 to $100. But it just depends on what has to be done. And some of these pieces of equipment, like on your fuel lines, they are harder to work on than others, and therefore it takes a little longer time to do that. And people don't realize, well, it's just a fuel line, it couldn't cost much, but it does cost much because it does consume a lot of time to do that, to repair it.
And how much is it if they use that jug of gas instead?
Do what now?
If they use one of those VP mixes, how much would that run?
Like a gallon of this VP mixture is $26.99, whereas if you buy the steel, I think it's like $41. So, and then they make it in quarts. The quart can is like $9.99. But like I say, they do really well, and I can testify to that. I always like to try something before I tell somebody about it. But like I say, I use that in my chainsaw, and since I've started using that, I don't have no problem whatsoever. But that's basically what I've got. Anybody got any questions?
How often are you using that in your chainsaw now?
I use straight, yeah. And then, and your chainsaws is the steel is a 50-to-1 mix, Husqvarna is a 50-to-1 mix, and they also make a 40-to-1 mix. True Fuel makes it, which these other companies make it too. But no, that's all I use in my chainsaw. And your fire departments do that because when that time comes, they have to have it ready to go, and that's the reason they definitely use that. But that's what I've got, Shad.
Well, let me grab your mic from you. And maybe we take a break, and we'll be right back with the second half of this. All right, welcome back. We're doing the talk on winterizing tools, and Wade Blair from Fraser's just talked on the small engine stuff, and I just wanted to hit real quick on a couple of other things. While you're working on winterizing, this is a good time of the year to sterilize and oil up other tools that you've got. So any hand tools that you've used, maybe it's your saws that you want to have sharp going into the winter. It might have storm damage. You know, if we have a big snowstorm or an ice storm, that's not the time of the year to find out that your chainsaw don't run. So going ahead and having a sharp chain on it and having it good to go will save you a headache. When Wade was giving those prices, I was thinking, you know, it's not just about how much it cost at the mechanic. It's about the time that you lost having to drive it over to get it worked on, and the time you're waiting while they're working on it. So, but if you've got other tools, and I'm thinking about like loppers and pruners, those are things that can have diseases on them from back during the season. They rust with moisture during the winter, and so this is a good time of the year to go ahead and get them sharp and to lube them up, put some kind of a protective oil on them, and I'm sure you can find that at any of your hardware stores to lube those things up and preserve them. As far as disinfectants that you might use, Clorox will work, rubbing alcohol will work, Lysol, scrubbing bubbles, any of those things that you would use as a sanitizer for your hands or at home can also be used to disinfect your tools. And then as far as the oil, I think 3-in-1 or WD-40 or any of those will be a good protective on it. If you didn't know it, this was a great program, partly because we had a guest speaker, but we also had Farm Bureau made a contribution towards a door prize today. And so we won't put them on the spot, but somebody here in attendance today is going to be the lucky recipient of a steel chainsaw, and that was provided by Kentucky Farm Bureau. So we want to thank them for that, and I hope that you will tune in to our next show. I think we've got one coming up. The next one is probably on home fire safety is the next one that's going to be on TV. But thank you for tuning in today, and hope you have a good November.